A food additive that is banned in 160 countries is sitting quite legally on supermarket shelves. Absurd, right? That's exactly what we're talking about today. We're taking a look at 13 different substances that are found in some foods and are causing heated discussions worldwide. Some of these substances, due to their high toxicity, are banned in numerous countries, while others continue to be used without restriction. In our analysis, we examine the current situation, clarify what the core issue is, how these substances get into our food, and what potential risks they might pose. Let's start with one of the most commonly used substances, monosodium glutamate, also known as glutamate for short. This salt of glutamic acid acts as a flavor enhancer that intensifies the so-called umami taste, a term that comes from Japanese and can be translated as delicious or savory. Umami, along with sweet, sour, salty, and bitter, is one of the 5 basic tastes and conveys a rounded, full-bodied aroma, often associated with the taste of meat, broths, or fermented foods. Monosodium glutamate is widely used in convenience foods, soups, snacks, and Asian delicacies because it effectively supports the overall flavor of dishes. Although glutamate is harmless for most people, some consumers have reported side effects such as headaches, nausea, or general malaise, colloquially known as Chinese restaurant syndrome. Scientific research provides differentiated results on this. Some studies suggest a link between high doses and the aforementioned symptoms, while others indicate that individual reactions depend on various factors. For this reason, some countries have introduced strict labeling requirements to provide transparency for consumers. This is particularly important for those who are sensitive to monosodium glutamate. As an alternative, natural flavor enhancers such as nutritional yeast, dried herbs, or umami-rich ingredients like tomatoes, mushrooms, and fermented products can be used to achieve the desired taste without risking potential side effects. Now for the next topic, brominated vegetable oils, a problem in lemonades. For many years, brominated vegetable oils were used as emulsifiers in citrus lemonades like Mountain Dew and Fanta. Emulsifiers are substances that help to combine otherwise immiscible liquids like water and oil and create a homogeneous mixture. They lower the surface tension between the individual components so that a stable, uniform mixture is formed. The crucial problem is the bromine content contained therein, which can accumulate in the body. This accumulation is associated with a range of health problems, from neurological impairments to disorders of the skin and thyroid gland. Due to these potential risks, the use of brominated vegetable oils is already prohibited in numerous countries, including Japan and the European Union. In the USA, the substance is currently being phased out of recipes, but it can still be detected in some products. A critical look at the ingredient lists is therefore advisable to ensure that no potentially harmful substances are consumed. Consumers should be particularly vigilant with imported beverages or products with opaque packaging information to avoid unintentional bromine exposure. Now it's going to get a bit unappetizing. It's about the practice of chlorine treatment of chicken meat, a controversial method. In some countries, especially in the USA, chicken meat is routinely disinfected with chlorine-containing solutions immediately after slaughter to eliminate pathogenic microorganisms such as Salmonella and Campylobacter. The strong oxidizing power of chlorine is used in this process. However, chlorine does not only react with the bacteria, but also attacks organic components of the meat, especially proteins and fatty acids. This can lead to the formation of chloramines and organic halogen compounds. These byproducts are suspected of being harmful to health, as long-term intake may increase the risk of neurological impairments, skin irritations, and thyroid disorders. While work is still underway in the USA to reduce this practice, the European Union and China have already banned the use of chlorine in poultry processing. Instead, these regions rely on strict hygiene controls in slaughterhouses, which are intended to minimize contamination from the outset. And as one would expect, more recent studies also indicate that comprehensive preventive measures, such as optimized hygiene concepts and regular microbiological tests, represent a safe alternative to chemical disinfection without the need to use aggressive substances. Consumers who feel uncertain should pay more attention to transparent origin information and certifications from controlled husbandry. This not only helps to avoid unwanted health risks, but also promotes more sustainable and transparent food production. Let's move on to a more colorful case, literally, artificial food dyes. In a variety of processed foods, from sweets to soft drinks to baked goods, artificial food dyes such as titanium dioxide, abbreviated E171, as well as synthetic variants such as yellow number 5 and red number 40, are used to give the products a vibrant, attractive appearance. But although they visually enhance the food, these additives are increasingly being criticized. Scientific debates point out that these dyes may be associated with an increased risk of ADHD symptoms in children, impairment of the immune system, and possibly even carcinogenic effects. The problem is not only the choice of dye, but also the way these chemically produced compounds are broken down in the body. Some countries, especially France, have already completely banned titanium dioxide due to recent studies. Other regions are setting strict maximum limits, while in large parts of the world, especially in North and South America, the approval of these substances continues to exist, sending consumers a contradictory signal. Experts therefore recommend switching to natural alternatives, such as beta-carotene, which is obtained from carrots, or curcumin, a component of turmeric. Both not only give a fresh, bright color, but are also known for their potential health-promoting properties. In this way, consumers can enjoy the colorful spectrum of food while avoiding potential health risks. Let's move on to a curious case from the world of dairy production: rBGH, growth hormones in milk. In some countries, especially in the USA, recombinant bovine growth hormone, abbreviated rBGH, is used to increase milk production in cows. This biotechnologically produced hormone, which mimics the natural bovine growth hormone, leads to an increase in insulin-like growth factor 1, abbreviated IGF-1, in the milk, a protein that plays a central role in cell growth and cell division. Elevated IGF-1 levels are repeatedly linked in scientific studies to an increased risk of certain types of cancer, such as breast and prostate cancer, as this growth factor can potentially activate tumor-promoting signaling pathways, which leads to intense discussions in biomedical research. For this reason, the European Union, Canada, and Japan have decided to ban rBGH in the dairy industry and instead rely on alternative, strictly regulated production methods that do not use additional growth hormones. While proponents of rBGH point to the increased efficiency in milk production and the associated economic profitability, critics focus primarily on the possible long-term health risks. Consumers who want to play it safe should therefore opt for dairy products that are explicitly labeled as hormone-free or rBGH-free, as these come from production systems that use alternative procedures based on comprehensive hygiene concepts and animal-friendly husbandry. This makes it clear that the use of modern biotechnological methods in animal husbandry raises not only economic efficiency, but also complex health policy and ethical questions in which consumer confidence plays a central role. Let's now consider the case of an industrial additive with a controversial reputation: Azodicarbonamide, a substance that is used in industrial bakery production to treat flour and make bread and pastries appear fluffier and more voluminous. This use achieves an improved dough structure in mass production, which is particularly important for convenience products. However, the real problem begins when azodicarbonamide is thermally decomposed during the heating process. This produces various chemical byproducts, some of which have been identified as potentially carcinogenic in animal experiments and epidemiology-based studies, and thus could promote the risk of cancer. Due to these findings, regulatory authorities in the European Union, Australia, and numerous Asian countries have strictly banned the use of this substance. In contrast, azodicarbonamide remains approved in the USA and some other regions and is even used in fast food burger buns, for example, which repeatedly causes discussions among health-conscious consumers. While the scientific debate is still ongoing, and experts disagree about the actual impact of the daily metabolic burden from these byproducts, the case shows how modern technologies can offer economic and practical advantages on the one hand, but also bring profound challenges in risk assessment and consumer safety on the other. Consumers who want to avoid health risks as much as possible should opt for unprocessed bread from regional bakeries or certified organic products that do without this industrial additive and support traditional baking methods. After all the color stories and chlorine clubs, we now come to a danger that is often hidden, especially in foods where you would hardly suspect it: potassium bromate. Yes, you heard right, bromate. It almost sounds like a harmless term from a chemistry set, but in reality, it is anything but harmless, especially when it ends up in our pastries. Potassium bromate belongs to the category of baking aids. What exactly does that mean? Let's imagine a baker who wants to make a particularly fluffy, voluminous dough that rises evenly and forms a perfect crumb. This is where potassium bromate comes into play. It acts like a super fertilizer for the dough by strengthening the gluten network. This gluten protein ensures that bread remains elastic, gains volume, and has a fine-poured structure. In short, the bread looks better, feels fluffier, and sells more easily. For bakeries that focus on maximum efficiency, potassium bromate is therefore quite tempting. But this is exactly where the problem lies. Potassium bromate is suspected of being harmful to health. Possible effects on the kidneys and thyroid gland are particularly critical. The kidneys, our body's own filter organs, could be damaged by this substance, which can impair their function in the long term. Even more worrying are possible disorders of the thyroid gland, our hormone center. And as if that weren't enough, there are indications that potassium bromate could be carcinogenic. Studies show that kidney and thyroid cancer in particular could be promoted by the intake of this substance. In view of these risks, many countries have reacted and banned potassium bromate. The European Union, Japan, and China are among the pioneers who have consistently banned this substance from food. In these countries, it is illegal to use potassium bromate in food production or to sell corresponding products. But this is not the case everywhere in the world. In some countries, potassium bromate is still allowed and continues to be used on a large scale, often without clear labeling for consumers. The insidious thing about it, potassium bromate largely decomposes into potassium bromide during baking, a supposedly harmless compound. But beware, if the bread is not baked long enough or hot enough, questionable residual amounts of potassium bromate can remain in the finished product. How can you protect yourself? The answer is simple, but effective. A close look at the ingredient list is worthwhile. If potassium bromate is listed on the packaging, it is better to leave the product on the shelf. Anyone who wants to play it safe should opt for bread and pastries from traditional production, where quality and natural ingredients are paramount. Because one thing is certain, good bread does not need chemical tricks, but time, high-quality raw materials, and genuine craftsmanship. After the hidden dangers in pastries, we now turn to an ingredient that is neither tasteable nor visible, but lurks in countless foods and can cause considerable trouble in the long term: BHA and BHT. These cryptic abbreviations stand for butylated hydroxyanisole, abbreviated BHA, and butylated hydroxytoluene, abbreviated BHT, terms that already ring a bell, right? In fact, these are artificial antioxidants, i.e., chemical substances that protect food from spoilage. You could call them a kind of fountain of youth for chips, cornflakes, and the like, because their main purpose is to prevent fats and oils from going rancid. But where exactly do we encounter these chemical freshness helpers? The answer is simply everywhere. BHA and BHT are true all-rounders in the food industry and can be found in countless processed products, from crispy potato chips and sweet breakfast cereals to long-lasting cookies and cakes to creamy vegetable oils, margarine, convenience foods, processed meat and sausages, canned soups, nuts, trail mix, and even chewing gum. In short, wherever fat is contained and a long shelf life is required, BHA and BHT are often not far away. The problem? What is good for food is not necessarily healthy for us. And this is exactly where it becomes critical. Scientists are increasingly warning of possible health risks because BHA and BHT are suspected of influencing our sensitive hormone system. Their chemical structure is similar to the body's own hormones, which means that they can trigger hormone-like effects and disrupt our hormone balance with potentially far-reaching consequences. Even more serious is the fear that these substances could be carcinogenic. Although many studies on this come from animal experiments, initial indications of a possible danger to humans are worrying. In view of these risks, the European Union has set strict limits to keep the intake of BHA and BHT as low as possible. Some countries go even further. In Japan, for example, these preservatives are already banned, a clear sign that alternatives exist. What does this mean for us as health-conscious consumers? Anyone who wants to play it safe should avoid highly processed foods and increasingly opt for fresh, natural alternatives. And if it has to be a convenience product, a critical look at the ingredient list is worthwhile. If BHA or BHT appear, you can consciously decide whether the product is really worth buying or whether there is a better alternative. Fortunately, natural antioxidants exist that have a similar protective effect but are significantly less harmful. Vitamin E, which is found in high-quality vegetable oils and nuts, or rosemary extract, a herbal antioxidant with a strong protective effect, are good examples here. Anyone who specifically looks for products with such natural alternatives not only protects their health, but also sends a message against unnecessary chemical additives. Because in the end, our health should be worth more to us than a few extra months of shelf life for chips and the like. If you thought that BHA and BHT were already giving us enough headaches, then you better hold on tight now. It's going to get even more explosive. Because we are staying with the topic of preservatives, but now delving into the dark depths of a substance that is not only potentially harmful to health, but also comes from a surprisingly unnatural source, TBHQ. TBHQ, this somewhat cumbersome abbreviation, stands for tertiary butyl hydroquinone. The term tertiary describes the special spatial arrangement of the atoms in this molecule, but the really sensational thing is that TBHQ is a petroleum-based preservative. Yes, you heard right. Petroleum, the black gold that we usually put in our tanks or burn, is also found in our food, in the form of TBHQ. This synthetic chemical compound is produced in the laboratory from petrochemical raw materials. TBHQ belongs to the group of antioxidants and is used in the food industry to protect fats and oils from going rancid and to extend the shelf life of products, similar to BHA and BHT. But where exactly is this petrochemical preservative hidden in our everyday foods? TBHQ is a true master of disguise and can be found in a variety of highly processed products that we regularly consume: instant ramen noodles, frozen meals, crispy crackers, ready-made pizzas, and tempting potato chips, especially in these products, which often have a high fat content and are intended to have a long shelf life. TBHQ is a popular and frequently used additive. The problem: TBHQ is anything but harmless. Scientific studies have linked this substance to a number of serious health risks, especially possible liver diseases. The liver, our central metabolic organ, could be impaired in its function by TBHQ. There are also indications of an increased risk of developing tumors. Although many of the studies are based on animal models, the results are alarming. Particularly worrying are also indications that TBHQ could damage our genetic material and cause DNA mutations, a major risk factor for cancer and other serious diseases. Even if the exact mechanisms and long-term effects of TBHQ have not yet been fully researched, the available data certainly give cause for concern and justify a critical examination of this preservative. How is the world reacting to these risks? Here, a divided picture emerges. In Japan, the danger has been recognized and TBHQ has been completely banned in food. There are also strict restrictions on the use of TBHQ in China and the European Union, where the protection of public health is the top priority. In these regions, the precautionary principle is applied, in which the potential risks of TBHQ are weighted more heavily than the economic interests of the food industry. In other regions, such as the USA, the situation is unfortunately different. Here, TBHQ is still approved for use in food, without the strict restrictions or warnings that apply in Japan, China, or the EU. Apparently, the risk is either considered low or accepted in favor of other interests. Now it's going to get unpleasant. What follows now could be the pinnacle of disgust for some. LFTB, spelled out lean, finely textured beef, colloquially known as pink slime, is an industrially processed byproduct of beef production. It is made from meat scraps that remain after larger pieces are cut up but still contain usable muscle tissue. To extract this, the material undergoes a special processing process. First, the meat is slightly heated so that the fat it contains separates from the lean muscle proteins. The low-fat mass is then mechanically ground so finely that a pasty, almost pulpy consistency is created. To make the product microbiologically safer and prevent the growth of dangerous bacteria such as Escherichia coli, abbreviated E. coli, or Salmonella, ammonium hydroxide is added. This compound of ammonia and water raises the pH value of the meat, creating an environment in which many germs cannot survive. The end product, a fine, low-fat beef mass, is added to industrially processed ground beef as a filler. It can be found in frozen burger patties, ready-made meatballs, or hot dogs. Although LFTB consists purely of beef muscle tissue and may therefore officially be declared as 100% beef, the aggressive processing and the use of chemical additives make it a controversial product. LFTB is not approved in the European Union because the treatment with ammonium hydroxide is prohibited in meat products. In the USA, on the other hand, it was used in mass production for a long time. However, after public outcry and critical media reports, many fast food chains and supermarkets removed the product from their range. Nevertheless, it remains legal in the USA and continues to be used in certain meat products. Before we turn to the grand finale, there is a substance that creeps into our food secretly, quietly, and causes considerable damage to our bodies: trans fats. The term may sound familiar to many, but we now want to take a closer look at what exactly is behind it and why they are so problematic. Trans fats are a special type of fatty acid that is mainly produced by industrial processing. Liquid vegetable oils are partially hardened in a chemical process called partial hydrogenation to make them longer lasting and firmer. This changes the spatial structure of the fatty acids, and that is exactly what makes trans fats so dangerous. They drive up the bad LDL cholesterol level while simultaneously lowering the good HDL cholesterol level. This unfavorable shift increases the risk of arteriosclerosis, i.e., the calcification of the blood vessels, and makes heart attacks and strokes more likely. But that's not all. Trans fats also have a pro-inflammatory effect, impair the function of our cell membranes, and can cause serious long-term health damage. In short, they are poison for our bodies and should be avoided as much as possible. The health hazards are so serious that many countries have now taken drastic measures. In the European Union and China, trans fats in food are largely prohibited. Denmark was already a pioneer in 2003 with strict regulation. The WHO is also calling for the complete elimination of industrial trans fats from the diet. In the USA, there is also a ban, but with loopholes. Manufacturers are allowed to write 0 grams of trans fat on the packaging as long as a serving contains less than 0.5 grams. That sounds harmless, but with regular consumption, even small amounts add up to a considerable burden. Where are these insidious fats hiding? Especially often in highly processed foods, in baked goods, fried foods, fast food, and even in microwave popcorn. Some margarines and vegetable fats also contain trans fats if they are not explicitly labeled as unhardened. Anyone who wants to avoid them should avoid highly processed products as much as possible and increasingly opt for fresh, natural foods. When shopping, it is worth taking a look at the ingredient list. Terms such as hardened vegetable fats or partially hardened vegetable fats are clear warning signals, and even if a product is advertised as trans fat-free per serving, caution is advised. The best strategy? Fewer processed foods, more natural products. This not only protects our heart, but our entire body. And finally, we come to ractopamine. This name sounds almost like a futuristic robot from a science fiction film, but in reality, it is an extremely real and equally controversial agent of modern animal fattening. Ractopamine is a substance that is mainly used in pig farming, but also in cattle and poultry, to specifically promote muscle growth. Let's imagine an animal producer who wants to produce as much meat as possible in the shortest possible time to maximize their profits. This is exactly where ractopamine comes into play, a booster for muscle mass. It belongs to the group of beta agonists, active substances that function similarly to adrenaline. As soon as ractopamine docks onto certain receptors in the animal body cells, It triggers a cascade of biochemical processes that accelerate muscle building and at the same time inhibit fat formation. The result? Fast-growing, muscular animals with a lower fat content, ideal for efficient meat production. But as so often, this supposed miracle weapon also has a dark side, and it is considerable, especially when it comes to our health. More and more studies suggest that residues of ractopamine in meat could be problematic for humans. The list of potential health risks is alarming. Rapid heartbeat, cardiac arrhythmias, high blood pressure, anxiety, restlessness, sleep disorders, tremors, and even neurological impairments are associated with the active ingredient. These side effects are not surprising when you consider that ractopamine has a stimulating effect on the nervous system, similar to adrenaline. People with pre-existing cardiovascular diseases or anxiety disorders in particular could react sensitively to ractopamine residues. In view of these worrying findings, over 160 countries worldwide have banned ractopamine in animal fattening. The European Union, China, and Russia are among the pioneers of this precautionary and responsible policy. They consistently rely on the precautionary principle and argue that the protection of public health must take precedence over the economic interests of the meat industry. The ban often extends not only to the use of ractopamine in their own country, but also to the import of meat products that have been produced with this growth promoter, a clear signal for higher food standards and against potentially hazardous substances in our food. But such a ban has not been imposed everywhere. In countries such as the USA and Brazil, ractopamine is still widely used and is classified as harmless by the responsible authorities. Proponents argue that the residues in the meat are so low that there is no danger to humans as long as certain limit values are observed. Critics, on the other hand, consider these limit values to be set too high, point to insufficiently researched long-term effects, and criticize the lack of independence of the approval authorities, which are not infrequently under the influence of the agricultural lobby. So what can we as health-conscious consumers do to minimize the risk of ractopamine exposure? The safest strategy is to rely on meat products from regions where the active ingredient is banned, or even better, to switch to organic meat from ecological husbandry. Organic seals usually guarantee not only more species-appropriate animal husbandry and more environmentally friendly production methods, but also the renunciation of ractopamine and other questionable growth promoters. When shopping, a close look at the origin of the meat and corresponding quality seals, which can offer more security, is worthwhile, because our health and the well-being of the animals should always take precedence over dubious growth promises and cheap factory farming. If you enjoyed this episode and were able to take away valuable insights for a healthier life, we would be happy to receive your thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any important information and groundbreaking revelations in the future. And be sure to activate the bell so that you are immediately there for every new episode and always stay up to date. As always, we wish you a long, healthy, and happy life and the ability to make informed decisions for your health.